currently 25 and I have many, many goals in life. And like most at my age, there are many that I have achieved and many that I have given up on. I feel like after finishing school and starting to pursue a career, those other goals that I've had in the back of my head are really on the horizon, but it's mostly a matter of if I am motivated enough to achieve those goals. One of my current goals is to grow this channel and become a certified book yapper. And while I was doing some research on the psychology of DNFing, I stumbled upon the psychology of goal pursuit. I want to try to apply these psychological strategies to my many goals, both big and small, but today let's talk about it in small terms, such as reading a book. So here's a strategy on how to read more books backed by psychology. And I'll also give some of my thoughts on DNFing, because I'm a firm believer that we should be DNFing more books. But before I get ahead of myself, welcome to my reading corner, where everyone is welcomed. When we talk about DNFing, we are relabeling the act of giving up on a book. The inverse of giving up is the concept of persistence in goal pursuit. My research led me to an interesting academic article that I will break down called Resisting, Recognizing, and Returning, a 3-component model and review of persistence and episodic goals. When it comes to pursuing goals, there are 2 forms of persistence when pursuing them. The first is episodic goals, and the second is continuous goals. Let me break down both. When you think of a goal that requires episodic persistence, think of a goal that requires multiple episodes. So for example, if I wanted to learn Spanish, I could not sit down in just one sitting and learn Spanish. It would take several episodes for me to learn Spanish. So over a month to many years, I would have to re-engage with pursuing this goal, sitting down multiple times as opposed to one time. That leads me to the second form, which is continuous persistence. When you think of goals that require continuous persistence, think of goals that require a single pursuit. So for example, if I want to make dinner, I'm typically not going to take a break while making dinner. I can complete it in 30 minutes because I'm a great cook, and it's over. Goal achieved. The article notes that the critical differences between persistence in episodic goals and persistence in continuous goals are that whereas continuous persistence operates in a single episode and entails resisting the urge to give up, episodic persistence operates across episodes and entails more than just resisting the urge to give up during ongoing pursuit. Episodic persistence requires initiation. People have to repeatedly initiate new episodes of pursuit in order to persist. Thus, a model of persistence as resisting has limited relevance to persistence in everyday goals. Theories of goal-directed activity based on this model also have limited relevance to goal pursuit in daily life. Such theories fail to account for the many factors that support or undermine the initiation of goal pursuit episodes. Never give up is bad, or at least incomplete advice. I believe that reading a book falls under episodic pursuit. It typically takes you multiple sittings to complete a book. When you read a book, you typically have several forms of motivation. The first being the plot. For me, this is my biggest motivator. If I am enjoying the book, I will want to keep reading it, want to keep picking it up, thus being most motivated to read it. The second motivation I can think of is the length. For example, sometimes you have a very short book and you can finish it in one sitting. So in that logic, it can feel like continuous pursuit instead and be considered a quick win, especially when I'm looking at my TBR and all of my books are 600 pages. Yes, sometimes I will reach for the shortest one just to give myself a quick win. Now, I think the biggest motivator in society right now for people to read is community. When you are on social media or with your friends and they are all talking about the same book, you are motivated by the community to read that book. You want to understand what the hype is. You want to be a part of the club of people who have read this book and can talk about it now. Lastly, cost is a great motivator. If I buy a book, I have added cost as a motivator. I paid for this book, I feel obligated to finish it. So, if episodic persistence is the skill we must acquire to conquer our goals, what does the psychology currently say? Let me break down some current theories. The first is you just need to be motivated. Some motivation theories argue that persistence is determined by the value people derive from a goal and the likelihood of achieving it. I have to be obsessed with a book to be motivated to keep reading. I really struggle with books that take a while to kick off, and I need to be obsessed in order to have that motivation to keep reading. Some believe that self-control is the key to pursuing your goals. Self-control is the prioritization of an abstract or long-term goal over a conflicting proximal alternative, such as the desire to quit. Now, I personally have no self-control. If I'm really honest, finishing a book is not the biggest priority in my life most of the time, and there are several other competing motivations and things I need to do. So I know personally this would not apply to me. I just don't have self-control. I feel like I know many people that can just sit down daily and read for the sake of reading, even if they're not enjoying a book, but that is not me. But maybe it's you. Now, the third thought is very interesting. It's called goal disengagement. Theories of goal adjustment describe that people adjust to unattainable goals by deliberately disengaging from them and re-engaging in different, more attainable goals. Specifically, when people experience challenges during the process of goal pursuit, the accrual of negative feedback spurs a so-called action crisis, during which people deliberately consider the cost and benefit of continuing pursuit versus giving up. Navigating disengagement decisions well and giving up on goals when it is beneficial to do so is theorized to be a self-regulatory skill. I feel like this is most relevant when I look around my apartment and I see random books scattered everywhere. These were books that I just don't have the goals to say I officially gave up with, but it's still kind of sitting there, even though I have no intention of picking it up again. Now, let's talk about the strategy that this article does offer. Rather than focusing exclusively on persistence as resisting, the model suggests that instead, persistence often entails 1. Resisting the urge to give up, 2. Recognizing opportunities for pursuit, and 3. Returning to the goal by re-engaging in pursuit. So how would I adapt this strategy to reading books? Well, let's start with resisting the urge to give up. Now, for me, like I said, when it comes to reading books, the cost benefit of reading a book versus what I'm going to get from reading that book is just not that high in my life currently. I do love a good book, but there's other things I rather do, if I'm very honest. Instead, what I can do is promise to recognize if I should give up earlier by instituting a 100-page rule. I solemnly swear to push myself through the first 100 pages and make a quicker decision on if I like the book or not. If I am not motivated to keep reading the book after 100 pages, I am going to happily give up. Let's talk about the second step, recognizing your next opportunity for pursuit. Now, this is tricky and would only be instituted by me after I've decided to keep pursuing the book after 100 pages. This step has made a huge difference in how I've been approaching other goals in my life. When you miss an opportunity, aka an episode to persist, quickly identify the next opportunity to pursue that goal. For example, if I plan to go to the gym on Monday but ended up not, I need to quickly determine when will I have the next opportunity to go to the gym. I think this will help keep the goal on the horizon, and I can easily do this with books by always being like, okay, I didn't read it tonight, but when is the next time I can read it? Oh, I'll have time in morning before I work. And let's talk about that last step, returning to the goal by re-engaging in pursuit. We define returning as seizing an opportunity for pursuit, the actual act of re-engaging in pursuit. Recognizing and returning bridge the gap between episodes of pursuit. They become relevant when people are not engaged in pursuit, but remain committed to a goal. Now, considering the psychology, please let me know what you think and how you might adapt this to your life in both big and small ways. But before we end, let me leave you with some reading rules of engagement. Rule number 1, give it 100 pages to spark your motivation. If you aren't itching to keep reading, move on. 100 pages, in my opinion, is enough time to do a little bit of world building, a little bit of introduction to the characters, and start trickling in a hook. So if you feel like you don't like it after that, it's okay to move on. At the time it takes me to drag myself through a book I'm not really enjoying is just a loss in how many books I could be reading that are actually enjoyable. People need to remember that not every book you get, every book you see on TikTok specifically, or Book Talk, is not like good. Most of the books you read are maybe like a 3.5 to 4, but I thirst for the 5-star books. Looking back at my story graph, 15% of the books I read in 2024 were 5 stars. So why waste your time on 3-star books when you could just be moving through your list faster and reading more books that could potentially be 5 stars? Rule number 2, try the library. I mentioned briefly that I think cost is a big motivator for why we feel like we have to keep reading a book, even when we aren't enjoying it. And if you utilize your library correctly, you can completely demolish this motivation. Think about it. If you only get your books from the library, you no longer have to worry about the cost you put into reading that book. I also am a firm believer that this is a great strategy to keep your bookshelf filled with books that you actually enjoy. I personally will read a book at the library, and if I really like it, then I will buy the book, instead of buying a bunch of books and not reading them, or reading them and finding out I hate them and they're just taking up space on my bookshelf. And lastly, rule number 3, when it's early days, identify 30 minutes to read that book. 30 minutes is 15 to 30 pages depending on how fast you read. So that will get you to your 100-page goal much faster, thus allowing you to determine if you are motivated to keep reading that book. But I personally am going to hold myself to, in those early days, hey, just find 30 minutes somewhere and keep it pushing. Now look, finishing books does not make you a better reader. Finding books that speak to you, that's the magic. That's what we want. Now, how do we find those books? That's a video for another time. But I hope today you found some strategies and learned a little bit more about the psychology of goal pursuit and the rabbit hole I briefly fell down, and enjoyed this video. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are a psychologist, I'd love to hear your thoughts and strategies on how to pursue small goals like reading, or big goals. Like and subscribe, and thank you for joining me in my small corner of the world. Until next time.